I would have described myself before as a fearful, tentative, unsure, a fearful person. What I really was, I was a person with questions, and I had fear. But the questions led me to answers that overcame the fear. And I didn't go to them to overcome the fear. I went for the answers because I wanted to know the truth.
Keep watching to learn more.
Book 4 in the new Thinking Aloud dialogue series is Charles T. Tart, 70 Years of Exploring Consciousness and Parapsychology, now available on Amazon.
New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu. You can now download all 8 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free, or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org.
Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Today we're going to explore the topic of life and death. My guest, my dear old friend, Darryl Robert Schoon, is a minister with the Temple of Universality in Tucson, Arizona. He is also author of many books, including You Can't Always Get What You Want, Light in a Dark Place, The Time of the Vulture, Report to the House Select Committee on Intelligence, Is God Confused? And the Way to Heaven. Welcome again, Darryl.
Very good, Jeffrey. I'm watching you, because I can't keep track of these myself. Anyway, that's what my fingers are for. And I'm looking at you and I'm going, all right, this is good. And then you got to the end. Perfect.
Yeah.
They're good.
Well, you wrote them. I just have to recite them.
Okay. All right. Well, the suggested topic is life and death. And when you told me that, I thought, well, that's interesting because I'm a spiritualist.
Yes.
And, we don't believe in death.
Mm-hmm.
Not that the transition called death does not happen. All right. We may be fools, but we're not fools on that point. All right. Now, in my growth or my experience, my first real thing or questioning of it happened before I got into the spiritualist church. Okay. We were with Marshall Thurber's Positive Deviant Network.
Yes. Select
Group of out-of-the-box thinkers that Marshall brought together. All right? And this was the first meeting. So we really didn't know each other. There's around 70 of us. The dues were like $5,000 a year. We met 4 times a year. Very interesting group of people. Well, this guy got up to give his presentation. We're all members. And he had been a gang leader in Toronto as a youth. All right? He now owned all the real estate, all the RE/MAX franchises in one state in the country. He had a lot of money. All right. And he and a friend were like sort of partners. All right. In their business deals. And they were very different. All right. The guy who was presenting first was very outgoing, very slick, very smooth, and very metaphysical, very spiritual. His friend and his partner was very quiet. He was the money guy, hands-on guy, very like this, and didn't speak a lot, all right? But they'd done all these business deals together. And so the first guy gets up and he says, listen, he said, we really, me and my blah, 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 I won't name them, have disagreed on a lot of things. And one of them is about God, all right? And I said, when are you going to believe in God? And he said, until I have proof, okay, or whatever. But that's what kind of guy he was, all right? So then he turns and says, I'm going to have him tell you his story. and he knows what story I want him to tell you. So this guy gets up. We never met any of us, most of us before two days before. So this guy gets up, and he's nervous. You can clearly, he's not used to speaking in front of crowds. And because he said, could you all give me a clap because he was that nervous. And I thought how touching. He was that genuine that he wanted us to come. And he just said, all right, he said, and he starts to tell us a story. And he said that he had a really bad heart condition. All right. And they had just done an IPO.
Initial public offering.
And he said it was his birthday, and they had a big party for him, and there they were. Okay. So he says he goes to the party, and he steps out of the limo or car, and massive heart attack. Doesn't know, he's just gone. All right. And then he says the next thing he knows, he is having what we call out of the body experience. He sees his body on the floor, laying there. He's watching it. All right. And the next thing he knows, he sees like a tunnel, as they say. And he's going on this thing, and he hears a voice. It was his grandfather's voice. His grandfather was dead. All right. And a hand comes out for his hand, and he puts his hand into it. And he said he remembered he put his hand out, and his arm was that of a 6-year-old boy, the age when he knew his grandfather. So they're walking along, and he said he felt great. He wasn't afraid. He just felt really good. And his grandfather said, laddie, that was his name for him. Laddie, this is not your time. You have to go back. He says, but when you go back, I want you to tell your father something. Tell your father that I love him. And then he said, the next thing he knew, he was on a stretcher. Everybody was around him. Paramedics, giving him this stuff. And they're getting ready to load him in the ambulance. And his eyes open. The people sort of screaming like he's not dead. And his father is looking at him. All right, his grandfather, who was there. It's because it was his birthday. And he says, no, tell my son, who was his father.
Right.
So his grandfather his father is looking at him like really concerned. And he said, Grandpa just said to tell you he loves you. And his father broke down in tears. One, the kid is alive, and two, the message about his grandfather. And his grandfather his father told him later, he had never told him those words. Never said, I love you. All right. And and the guy who was giving the talk was clearly uncomfortable. He didn't like talking in crowds, and he just told us this sort of outrageous story. Yep. All right. So that was 2005, the first meeting of the PDN. All right. What happens later, then we see Hoyt, who predicts this change in my life.
Robinette,
the psychic.
Spiritualist medium.
He's a spiritualist medium.
Yes.
Very well known in certain circles.
We've talked about extensively in a previous interview on spiritualism, which I'm going to link to in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. For those who haven't watched that interview, it would be a good one to watch.
Yes. So we meet Hoyt in 2005, all right? And I know of psychic phenomena, all right? And I didn't know it like you knew it. I found out later, much later, that you had studied this as a reality. All right. And you had studied at a time when I sort of blew it all off. That's how I'm very dismissed. I'm a fixed sign. I'm an Aquarian, and we're either into it or out of it. There's very little gray area. All right. So it wasn't in my, so I was out of it. Okay. So our friend had introduced us to him. She said she knew this psychic. So we go see this guy in 2005, and he was incredible. 2006. He told me, and we went over before, he said, that's when I wasn't talking to anybody. I was at war with the world, wasn't talking to anybody. That was how I was then. And Hoyt, his first thing he says, you're a teacher. I go, no. Then he goes, he's hearing things, I think. I don't know what they hear. He's psychic. I'm not that way psychic. He goes, you teach. No. Then he goes, you know things that other people don't know. I said, everybody thinks that. They know things that other people don't know. I said, I have no audience. I have no voice. I have no agreement in this world. And he said, that will soon change. People will begin seeking you out. In fact, that's how we reconnected. The last time we had seen each other was 12 years before in San Francisco. All right. Which we discussed on our last program.
That's right.
And now this is 12 years later. And you had been, you were a known figure. Surprised Jeffrey Mishlove. I mean, because when we both met, we were hippies. You were in this paranoia. You were out. You were still going to graduate school. Yeah. I'd gone to law school, flunked out, and had a Chinese restaurant. But we're still the same. We're still in that same milieu.
I was a graduate student in criminology when I first met you.
We should have talked, Jeffrey. I could have told you many things if I had foreknowledge.
Yes.
In fact, I'm going to make an observation. So you were in criminology.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a story. So I found myself at Lompoc Federal Prison Camp. All right. No fences, lowest level security, so there's no danger, I mean, that kind of stuff, right? And they used to have all these criminology students go through there for the dog and pony show. Mm-hmm. All right. See the prisoners. All right. So there we were at Lompoc Prison Camp, and we had these rooms. They were the big house was now converted for high level security. You had rolls of barbed wire, lockdown guns, everything really tight. We were a camp. Mm-hmm. I call it the penalty box of the stars. All right. So we didn't have we weren't chained up. We were none of that stuff, but we were in a prison. Mm-hmm. So they used to take these students in criminology classes down for the dog and pony. Mm-hmm. I saw them coming. Here they come. Here comes the assistant warden with these kids looking like this. Okay. So I knew they were coming to our room, and they're looking in the windows. Okay. So they came to our room, and I put up a piece of paper. I said, "Help! We're being held prisoner. These people are not your friends." I started a laugh. Okay, fine. All right. That's my little thing about criminology. Okay. I didn't know you had been majoring in criminology.
Yes, I did volunteer work at San Quentin.
Did you ever read Democracy in America?
By Tocqueville. Well, yes. In high school.
Yeah. And he had come over here to study our prisons.
Yes.
All right. In fact, I read it only after I got out of prison because my son, who had graduated from MIT, said, "Dad, you should read this." All right. And that's when I found that Tocqueville had come over here ostensibly to study he did come over to study our prisons, but he found out a lot more. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was psychic in many, many significant areas. All right. So anyway, what happens is that we're sitting there. I see Hoyt and I get this vision. He tells me I'm going to be a teacher. All right. Well, you are reading Richard Russell's Tao Theory Letter. This is the oldest newsletter on the Dow for investors in the United States.
Yeah, it was during my period of being a commodity trading advisor. And I got really into the markets myself.
In fact, until our last meeting, I didn't know that about you. Yeah. All right. Yeah. That was as much surprise to me about you that you had this secret life as a commodities advisor and trader that it was to you when you were reading Richard Russell's Tao Theory Letter in 2008, and out of the blue he quotes somebody named Darryl Schoon on money.
Yeah. Oh, I was so surprised.
You were so surprised. You emailed me and you go, "Darryl, is this you?" Same name, same spelling. Yeah. Is this you? Because from our pictures of each other, you as a commodities broker was no more, we're hippies. No more in the realm of possibility than I was, who had done a long stretch in time for drug dealing. All right. And before that had been a rug trader with the Chinese. All right. And a Chinese restaurant. Mm-hmm. So the idea that I'm writing about money was a pure shock to you.
Yes, it was.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So anyway, Hoyt was the thing that got us into spiritualism because there was a church in Tucson that used to sponsor him. I did not like churches. I grew up in a church. Every Sunday, put a little time, go to church, sit there, listen to it. And I was in a nice church. They weren't laying in guilt, shame, blame. They were kind. It was an American Baptist church. The forerunner of Southern Baptists broke away from the American Baptists because the American Baptists were not into slavery, and the Southern boy go, "Hey, we're into slavery." Yeah. That's where the Southern Baptists came from. So I was part of the my mother went to the American Baptist Church, and they were really nice people, but it was a waste of time to me. All right, didn't relate.
Yeah.
So Hoyt was sponsored in Tucson by a spiritualist church. I didn't even know what spiritualist churches were, okay? But Hoyt was extraordinary as a psychic. I mean, he told me things like he said, soon people will be seeking you out. You were the ones you knew who, you had already had my email.
I sought you out.
Yeah, but you're one of the few that had my email address.
Yes. Uh-huh.
All right. And you did seek me out. And other people sought me out from around the world.
Well, in fact, you had established quite a big reputation. Richard Russell was one of the most respected people, and here he is citing you in his newsletter.
What nobody else knows. I was, in fact, people may know of Mark Faber, Faber, Gloom, Doom. He took my pieces on China verbatim and asked permission to include them in his newsletter.
Uh-huh.
Well, I majored in Asian studies, so my things on China were not just about money, but I knew about China. Yeah. But Mark Faber asked and I still communicate with Mark every once in a while. But what people don't know, there was a guy named Harry Schultz. Did you know of him?
Harry Schultz, another big financial guru, pundit.
Yeah, pundit. He was in Switzerland at the time, living there, and he contacted me. So I was...
Yeah. You went from obscurity to having a major reputation. In the world of, I guess I'd call it financial forecasting.
Yes. So as a result of that, what Bucky Fuller called precession, one thing leads not necessarily to another, but it leads to many things sideways. We find out that Hoyt comes to Tucson sponsored by this spiritualist church. Okay? Now, this is psychic foreknowledge. Remember I told you earlier that Martha had liver and kidney failure and life death. She was basically dying and she recovered. It was a miracle. Okay? And it was a total miracle. All right? And we're driving back. We're coming out of intensive care in Phoenix. We're driving back to Tucson. This is year 2000. And Martha has basically a precognitive vision, a psychic vision. And she said she saw us in a church singing. And I got mad. I had been too far away. She goes, all right. She said, I'm not going to argue with him. I just saw it. So 7 years later, Hoyt comes to Tucson every year sponsored by this church. Okay. And I reluctantly want to go only to hear Hoyt. Okay. And I don't even know what kind of church this is. I don't know what spiritualists are. I know nothing about them. All I knew is they sponsored the most extraordinary psychic I had ever heard or been encountered of in my life. This man was incredible. All right. So we go, and Hoyt liked us because we were a little crazy. Right? And so the church was so booked up when he came, he told the church, make sure these people get appointments. He wanted to make sure that we had access to him when he was there. All right. So Martha and I go to this church, and that's where we're sitting there and in the spiritualist church, and I only went there to sign up to see Hoyt, and we find out there's no sign-ups that weekend. Well, I was about to leave, but as Martha told me, that's really impolite. So I'm sitting in church. I don't like to waste my time. I only like to be where I am, what I want to do, doing that. And I don't know, it's because I spent 7 years in prison doing I meditated there. I was supposed to be there. So we stayed, and Betty Tadaleski, who's the minister, she's deep into this spiritualism stuff. In fact,
she was the founder, as I recall.
She was the founder.
Yeah.
In fact, I want to tell this side story. We eventually did a series of interviews of things with Betty, and she talked about all these spiritual experiences she had.
They're up on YouTube right now. Yeah, all your interviews with Betty.
Yes. And in fact, if you go to the Temple of Universality, there's a thing where they're all there. But this specific time, this led to you. She gave a talk, and I in fact, I used to be with Betty. She used to be next to me. We were on TV. Yeah. We're filming it and stuff like that. And I played straight man to Betty. Because Betty is out there. All right. And I'd play straight man. And she'd say things I had to put in context so people could hold on to it. Well, one day she gave a talk on a healer in India named Sri Chakravarti. Okay. And Betty had been in India in 1982 at the Oberoi in Mumbai, which is now Mumbai. And she had been in the presence of this beautiful young woman who used her hands and fire and saw healings and was stunned. 1982. So this is 2011 or 12 or something like that. We're taping Betty. And now Martha's going to put up the title, but we don't know how to spell Sri Chakravarti. So we're out there Googling it on the internet, S-R-I, S-R-H-R-E-E, all these, and boom, we hit gold. Sri Chakravarti interviewed by Jeffrey Mishlove. There you were. You were interviewing Sri Chakravarti in 2010, the person that Betty had seen in India doing healings in 1982.
Yeah, and I interviewed her much earlier.
Oh, you did? So that was again.
That was from the original Thinking Aloud series.
Wow.
That ran from 86 to 2002. So it would have been probably in the 1980s or 1990s.
That was slightly after Betty saw her in India.
That's right.
All right. So Betty is out there.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, she's who she is. Yeah. And we're at the church the first day, and Betty is giving messages, and she goes to Martha, Wendy, I know that's not your name, but you've been in some mighty high places, and you're supposed to tell us where you've been. So here we are. We don't belong to this church. We know very little about it. We just went there to sign up for Hoyt, and we get this message. This has got to be 2007 or something like that. And we go, what do we do? I guess we got to tell her. What are we going to tell her about? Well, maybe we're supposed to tell her about
Wendy. What is the name Wendy?
Just Peter Pan. Peter Pan. You were like Wendy in Peter Pan.
So she's looking at you, talking to you directly?
Talking to Martha.
Your wife, Martha.
Yeah, and she calls her Wendy. I said, I know that's not your name, but you're like Wendy in Peter Pan. And you've been in some mighty high places, and you're supposed to tell us.
I see.
So we're flummoxed. So we do the kind thing, and invite Betty to breakfast. So we meet at the Tucson Racket and Tennis Club. And there we are. This has got to be 2007, 2008. And there's Betty. We have no idea she's an ex-Marine. She's real pretty. She's blonde. She's very prim, Southern girl. And something made me say this. I leaned over and I looked at her and I said, who are you and what are you doing? These words just came out of my mouth. And she started talking and telling us this extraordinary story about spiritualism. Mm-hmm. This extraordinary thing about how she was led to this church where these people she could talk to, it would totally change her life. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's how we sort of got into, and then the topic of life and death. See, the spiritualists believe there is the death that we see is the death of a body, the death of the incarnated personality, but not the death of the spirit. Mm-hmm. But to the rest of us here, that's a supposition. At best, if not fantasy.
Well, most religions accept something along those lines.
Yes. And if you don't accept the religions, you don't believe it at all.
Right. And many religions don't go into it.
They don't go at all. Other than saying there's something on the other side.
I grew up in a conservative Jewish community, and basically, as far as any discussions were concerned about the afterlife, it was, we don't talk about it, period. And probably pretty much people would have said, when you're dead, you're dead.
Yeah, exactly. When it came down. So here we are in this church. Mm-hmm. But by then, we've already talked to our parents through Hoyt. We've gotten messages from them. My aunts came in through to Martha, not to me. Yeah. Martha was with Hoyt, and he goes, 3 flowers. Tulip, myrtle, violet. And Martha goes, those are Darryl's aunts. So they came in to talk to Martha. Yeah. All right. So that we had, it was amazing. I had conversations. I had better conversations with my father through Hoyt than we had one-on-one. Mm-hmm. We sort of apologized to each other, explained our positions, and it was cool. Mm-hmm. My father told me that, because he knew I was bitter.
So you're talking about some real heartfelt communications at a profound level. This is not airy-fairy to you.
We fell into this without even looking for it. I was not looking for a belief system. I wasn't looking for this stuff. In fact, this is what happens. How we got into this, Jeffrey, is that in 2004, and this is when I was talking to nobody. Yeah. I was in shutdown, all right?
You had been out of prison a few years.
10 years. I was out of 10 years, but still, Darryl and his attitude. You know, I mean, I had an attitude. Right? I mean, in fact,
because you described in our previous interview achieving a state of enlightenment
in prison
that didn't erase the attitude.
No, it didn't erase it. In retrospect, I'm sure it mitigated some of it, but it didn't erase it.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, when I got out, one of my jokes was, "No wonder they don't let ex-cons have guns." All right. And so there I am. And all I wanted to do was get out of the country. That was my thing. That's why we were in Tucson, to get out of the country. Find a neutral place to go. Right. And so, we were in 2004, we're at a fundraiser for Move On, the political organization. Okay. And, we meet this lady. She's an older lady. And usually older ladies in the foothills in Tucson are Republicans. Well, when Michael Moore was talking about Bush, this lady next to me was muttering. She was, boy, did she have an attitude. In fact, I started laughing. I poked Martha. I said, you got to check this lady out. So we became very good friends with her. Martha said, we're going to adopt you. Your kids don't, if you're going to talk about a president like that, I'm not going to pay for the phone call. She said her daughter said that. Martha said, we're going to adopt you. All right. We became close friends with her. She introduced us to Hoyt Robinette and that artist that we sent you the Maitreya of.
Yes, sir.
Two extraordinary different people. And Pat Gallinette was so sweet. She goes, I don't know why they like me so much. All I did was introduce them to two people. Two people who changed our lives. All right. I mean, two people who really changed our lives. So that happened in 2004 at the movie. We met her. 5 years later, I'm in a direct voice with Hoyt. A direct voice is when the medium drops out. All right. When you're in a private session with mainly psychics, they're hearing things, and I call them like PBX operators. You ask a question and they listen. They're told.
They repeat what they've heard.
They repeat what they've heard.
Yeah.
Okay. But direct voice, they're gone. Direct voice, they speak using their voice, but that person is out in trance. All right. In fact, with Hoyt, he starts it by doing the Lord's Prayer with you. And halfway through the Lord's Prayer, he just drops out and you finish it. And my joke with Hoyt was, Hoyt, it's not that hard to memorize. Like, he just couldn't say it anymore, so dropped out half. Yep. No, but he's out. And his gatekeeper came in, Dr. Kenner. Now, by 2009, I knew Dr. Kenner pretty well. I was seeing Dr. Kenner far more than I was seeing you this period of time, even though we knew each other. Because every time Hoyt came, we go see Hoyt go into trance, and Dr. Kenner's the gatekeeper. So we knew Dr. Kenner.
Yeah, you've become familiar with these sessions.
Okay. So there's Dr. Kenner. And he says, do you have any questions? I go, no. I said, but I really would like to thank you. He says, for what? I said, I'm at the stage of my life, because at that time I'm 69. Okay? No, 69. I was 64. I'm 64. And I said, for people putting the car in the garage, draining the oil, locking up, shutting things down. And I said, this spiritualism has been like a backstage pass. All right, to the other side. I didn't even know existed, and I got a pass to the backstage. And he goes, well, it all started with the movie. And I go, movie? He says, yes, the movie and the woman. And I'm still flummoxed. We're in the dark. This is 2009. This is what he's telling me. The movie and the woman? He says, yes, the movie and the woman named Pat Gallinette. We met at that movie.
Oh, yes.
Shock. Got me straightened up. And he said, of course, this was planned decades in advance. Okay? So, when we talk about death, or when I talk about death, it's with a very different, I hold it totally differently than I did before. One of my sayings before I got into spiritualism was death was a slap on the face of God. I just instinctively said, that's what death is. That was my own little subtitle. Now I know that what we call death does not happen, at least the way we think it does.
In other words, you were saying if death exists, then God doesn't.
Yeah, how could that be? You're right. You're right. In a sense, I never thought of it that way, but that's what it was. Death is a slap on the face of God. Yeah. It sort of ran contrary to the oneness, or whatever it was. And I'm not steeped in theology, but it just came to me.
That's how you felt.
That's how I felt. Death is a slap on the face. It just came to me.
Yeah.
And so we fall into this world through Hoyt of where we're talking to them. I'm talking to my father, things that you don't believe. Like, we told you about how we became ministers.
Yes.
You chose. I said, we didn't choose. We were in a trance circle and we were there and it came in and Martha was getting a message from her mother and her mother goes, isn't that wonderful? My little girl's going to become a minister. Martha and I go, what? But you hear a lot of stuff in trance and not out.
Now, let me just interject for a second, because as I recall at the last interview we did on spiritualism, some viewers posted a note saying, what a fool this man is. He doesn't understand cold readings.
I would think that too. I would think if I didn't believe this could happen, I would make up a reason why it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I would do that because when the mind cannot accept the phenomena, it will make it your disbelief reasonable. Yeah. My joke about like if I was a skeptic during the time of Jesus and I hear about him turning water into wine, I would draw a parallel between Jesus and his relationship with Joseph of Arimathea, who was a merchant, and I would say he had a lot of bad old wine that he couldn't get rid of, and so at the party, Jesus asked him for a favor, so he showed up and gave him all this free wine, and it turned into a miracle. The story of Jesus turning water into a miracle. And everybody who didn't want to believe it would believe my story.
Yeah.
They would believe my story because I would give them something to hang their disbelief on.
Right.
So I understand people's disbelief. I didn't believe this stuff before I ran into it, Jeffrey. In fact, Yazdi's here, he's
yes, who came to Albuquerque with you, your friend.
We're all ministers in the church. Yazdi and I would say, here we are, Hoyt's giving messages, and we're going, how's he getting this stuff? We're looking. Our minds, the intellectual, rational mind, will not believe the irrational. I've used the I Ching for years. And one of my beliefs about the I Ching, to use it, you have to dispense with the rational. You have to dispense with the idea that you cannot shake 3 coins 6 times, consult a book, and find out about what's going on in your life. That is an irrational thought. I have used that 50 years. It's been like radar. It's told me things. I mean, it still does. All right? But all you rationalists out there, you have my love. Have patience. Just have patience.
Well, and we've done many interviews on this channel showing that an understanding that can include an afterlife and synchronicities
pre-life
can be quite rational.
I love that because it expands the idea of rationality.
Yeah. All
right. I have such dubious attitude about the rational mind. I've also held that the mind is the rational mind is our biggest enemy here on this planet. I told you the story about my cat, and my cat was real smart. I used to be on my hands and knees, talk to my cat, and I said, I know you're thinking. It's not good. This is not a good process.
The cat would tell you.
No, I tell the cat.
You tell the cat.
Yeah, it's not. I know what you're thinking. It's not good. Stop it before you get too far into it. It's a trap. Thinking is a trap because thinking will lead you. Thinking will give anybody the evidence they're looking for. So here we are with the spiritualism, and I'm looking at it, and all of a sudden I'm realizing or thinking that this stuff is true because I'm talking. This didn't come in through other things. This is. I wasn't looking for evidence of afterlife. It had to come to me in my own time, and it did. And so I ended up at a spiritualist church. I didn't have to buy the ideology of spiritualism because I already met Hoyt. I was already talking to my parents on the other side. They'd already been communicating with us. They'd already been making predictions. We had actual experience with the other side.
Well, Darryl, when you first proposed, or when we had the discussion that led to this topic on life and death, you shared with me a story of a young 18-year-old girl who died, Elizabeth Blue.
Okay, now, remember our previous talk was about suffering?
Yes.
Let me tell you how that hooks in.
Yes.
So Martha and I are in Tucson. And we're part of this Diksha group. It's an Indian meditation thing, hands on, okay? And anyway, it was a couple from Berkeley. We loved them. We were all Bay Area refugees, okay? And Lucia and Zelly. And Lucia's daughter she was 17 years old, Elizabeth, very beautiful, and she had moved out of the house in high school. So she's living a very independent girl, okay? And then Elizabeth goes away to college, all right? And so we didn't know her very well, but we knew who she was. She passed through, never sat in the spiritual meetings and stuff like that, okay? That was in 2007, 2008, all right? Now, so I do a seminar with Lucian Zelli called Opening of the Heart. Okay. We're in the middle of this seminar that they're doing, and one of our friends, we're in the middle of dealing with our parental relationships. All right. And our friend goes, boy, I never thought we were going to get into this. I said, oh, opening the heart sounds real wonderful. If they said getting it straight with mom and dad, none of us would have signed up. All right. But there we were dealing with our parental relationship. Okay. And as part of that process, we pulled a tarot card. Now, Jeffrey, you got to realize this is 2007. I am 60-something years old. Okay, 62. And I've never pulled my tarot card. And I'm a hippie. Hippies were into the tarot. The fool, we all knew all that stuff. But I had the I Ching, so I had no need for that. Alistair Crowley, all the interpretation. I thought I had a pure stream, the arrogance of the mind. Okay. So I pulled my card. I had never done it before. I'm at 62, a hippie. That's amazing. I pulled my card. It's number 5. I go, hand it to Lucia, the Hierophant, the teacher. Remember Hoyt said, you're a teacher? Yes. I get that card. You're a teacher. All right. And I give it to Lucia. I go, what does this mean? She says, learning through adversity, suffering. And I told you, we talked about suffering the last time. Learning through adversity. And then she says, that's Elizabeth's card. And I thought, this beautiful 17-year-old girl, I wonder what's going to happen to her. Because I'd been to prison twice. I've had a life that was so extreme that you could barely hang on. And here's a 17-year-old girl. And Lucia said, Elizabeth's really mad about it. Really,
Yeah.
Okay. This is what happens. That's 2007 or 8. Well, a few years later, in 2011, Martha would always have this Thanksgiving for what she called the odds and, and you would never think Lucian Zelli and her family would come over. Ever, because they're a family. They got a pod. It's Thanksgiving. And Martha said, for almost no reason, she turns to Zelli and said, listen, if you guys want to come over for Thanksgiving? And Zelli goes, God, yes. And the reason was this. The kids were teenagers, rebellious. Mm-hmm. And she said, sitting across from these 2 kids at the dinner table with a turkey in the middle was not going to make things better. Okay? So we invite them to dinner. Mm-hmm. Wonderful dinner. We get to know them. And at a time, we have this big dinner. So they're there. 1 year later, and I think Elizabeth was like 21 at this time. The week before Thanksgiving, she gets a diagnosis of lymphoma, brain cancer. They come over. We don't talk about it. Okay. Great. They're gone. And then the year goes on. Now, Tucson is full of healers. We heal like other people play Little League. All right? I mean, we're into it, Yeah. And so all these people were doing these things and everybody thought it was going to turn out. It got worse. Mm-hmm. It turned for the worst. She got an aneurysm. They brought her in hospice. Okay. Intense. So we're sitting there and we're just bringing them food, because I cook, we wouldn't ask, we just do that. And then, and Elizabeth knew who we were. And she would come to the church sometime with when we were talking, when we were doing it. So there was a connection in there somehow. Okay. And Lucia called us and she says, Elizabeth wants you guys to come. And she was laying in the bed. They had turned the living room into a flower. It was hot. It was, she couldn't barely talk because of the thing like that. She was going out now, okay, at the time. And Martha, they leaned down and they talked and said something. And then it was my turn, okay. I leaned down and I told Elizabeth.
You're talking to a 21-year-old
dying person. She's about from dying.
Beautiful young girl.
Beautiful young girl going out. She's going to last maybe a week.
Everybody is around trying to be healing, being positive, and she's dying.
So I leaned down and I said to Elizabeth, I just don't want to be trite. I had to say something stupid. And she laughed. I said, but thank you for including us in your life. Okay, the last time we see her. Then they have this memorial, huge memorial in Tucson. A lot of people come, all right? And they had people reading her poetry. Jeffrey, it was stunning. The poems, at the age of 11, she knew. I mean, if you Google Elizabeth Blue poems, you will find her on the web because her mother, Maya Lucia, put a website up about Elizabeth Blue. And what I would ask everybody to do, because it's so important, to me it's important, it's significant, go to the website and look at her poems, but start at her youngest age, 9, 11, 13, 16, like this, okay? They're stunning. It was like, in one, she says, I'm in the shadows with the spirits who know me. I am one of them. They are one of me. And it was like she knew she was at the age of 11. She knew, and one of the things, she said, I hope you live and lay down and die. It was like she knew she lived in a whole, she was connected in a way that we never knew as friends of her parents. She was precognitive. Okay. So then we're stunned. Then what happens? A month later, we're in a trance circle at the temple with Christine Fassetti. She's in a trance. And we had just come back from the Bay Area, and one of Martha's friends had passed away. He was a rock and roll blues musician named Robbie. Okay. And Saint Germain comes into the trance circle. See, that's the extraordinary thing about Christine. She can channel these different high levels. Saint Germain comes in, and he asks if there's any questions. And this is something that rarely happens. And Martha goes, I like my friend Robbie. I found out he just died, and I want to know if he's all right. And Saint Germain pauses, and Robbie's quite fine. He's all right. He says, there's someone here who wants to talk to you. And it was Elizabeth Blue. And she told Martha, because Lucia had been beating herself up for how she had parented, all her guilt, all the times she felt she had said the wrong thing or not given her permission, all those things a mother thinks when her daughter dies at the age of 22. All of it. Tell my mother she was perfect. She did nothing wrong. Tell my mother that. And she ended it. It was stunning. The word, it was like a roll coming through the room. I love you. I love you. It was like a wave after wave of and that's how it faded out. And we're like, holy smokes. And then the next trance circle, the next month, we were told that Elizabeth had been a master. Now, who do we know about masters? Dewal Cool, Saint Germain, the names we give for, master souls. We don't know who anybody is. We don't know from the low to the high. I mean, that's why that song, God's just another one of us, on the bus, who trying to find his way home. Who wrote that. That's really true because we all are God, but we're not personally God. We're impersonally God. All right. And Elizabeth, she was beautiful. I mean, she was, and she lived it. And she came back to have this short life. We have no idea why, but she was a master soul, or at least that's what we're taught. I have nothing else. I believe it.
You read her poetry.
It's stunning, insightful, so insightful. About life itself at 13. At 13. They read her poetry at the funeral, at the memorial service. So we had a different vision of Elizabeth after she had passed them before. But let's go back to the beginning. When Lucia told me at the seminar, number 5, learning through adversity. And we were talking about suffering. Yeah. We have no idea why she came in to live that short life and to suffer. We have no idea. We have no idea why any of us suffer. Because suffering is a term given by uncomfortableness. We know that uncomfortableness oftentimes is the only thing that causes us to change. My joke growing, was like, if we were 5 years old and we didn't have to get off the little rocking horse, we'd still be at the party screaming not to get off the rocking horse. We don't want to stop the good thing. But we are in I'm not going to call it an illusion and saying that it's not real. We're in a phenomena of life and death. what is it? You know, Jeffrey, when I started my quest, I didn't start when I became a hippie. I started way before. And I was a kid. I was a young teenager before then. And the question came to me, what's going on? It was a straight out question. What's going on? And I was suspicious. I knew something was going on and I didn't know what it was. I was going to church. It's somebody's story. Your uncle tells you, well, this is why your mom's like that. Maybe, maybe not. He knows her better than you do, but maybe he's wrong too.
Yeah.
Your mom has a story about why she was the way he was and probably blame your uncle. All right? Everybody's got a story. Everyone about this. So what this is, what we call life, in one way is a set. It's an empty set with figures, persons, life, and stuff like that. And that's what all of us have done, at least the ones I think watching your program. The people watching your program have decided, well, you know, there might be something more than what I think. I'm willing to listen to other points of view. There are other channels out there. That ain't it. That is, there's something going on out there and I know what it is. I ain't going to listen to anybody else. Your channel is, there's something going on out there. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe they know. And these guys are really interesting. That's what you've done. You've poked around at the edge. All right? And my feeling is this. What we don't know is what we want to know. What we don't already have experienced is what we want to experience. And as general as that is, I think because of the way of the universe, it's going to bring it to us. I have faith, Jeffrey. I mean, you know, in the Bible when it said, oh, ye of little faith, you're talking about me. I used to say my appropriate headstone should be, here lies Darryl Robert Schoon. He had everything except faith. You know, I've had I've got friends, I go through like, you know, what's going to happen? I mean, how many miracles do I need? How many coincidences do I need? Well, you know, it may be endless. And time will take forever for me to get it. Or it may not. Maybe what happened, maybe I'm close. But until you're there, you don't know. But I do know that I've experienced things that other people, that I didn't expect to experience. In prison, that state of oneness, Jeffrey, I was talking to it. I knew. In fact, one of Marshall's friends found out that Marshall told him, Darryl got, and when he was in prison, when he was meditating, and he came up to me and said, so you got there? I go, yeah. He said, so did I. I go, really? He said, yeah. And he said, how long did it last? I said, I'm not sure. Because when you're there, it really is timeless. You know, you don't count. You just know you're there. All right. And he said, well, what happened when it was over? And I said, nothing. I said, I really didn't expect it to come. It just happened to me. He said, I got pissed. I said, you did? He said, yeah. I was doing Kundalini yoga to get there. You know, fire breath. And then I got there, and then he wasn't there anymore. He said he got pissed. He thought it was going to last forever. You know, you climb out of the hole. Oh, man, you get your leg up. Oh, you know, and you pull your leg up because you're afraid that the alligator's going to get your leg. You get your leg up. You know, you're lying there, you catch your breath, and then you find yourself in the hole again. Well, that's what it's like when you've been there and you find yourself not there again. All right. Now, part of me is there. Part of me is not there. Part of you is there. Part of you is not there. Part of all of us is there. Part of us is not there. Getting those two parts to communicate is a trick. Yep. All right? And the only part that we have control over is this part. And this part is not what we think it is. Like I told you the last time, this part is afraid of it. This part is afraid of not being all this part and nothing more. This part is afraid of being limitless. This part is afraid of being forever. This part is afraid of being of the one. Because it wants to be Darryl Schoon, Jeffrey Mishlove, Linda, blah, 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 you know, Samuel, whatever. It's used to it. My metaphor about us on this planet, Jeffrey, is this. We're gods in t-shirts, but we're identifying with the t-shirt. Time to let it go. And this is what I think is going to happen. Because we talk about the future. We talk about the changes that we're in now. And I can only say this. I know in my life, the greatest changes have been forced on me with a little help. but they've been forced to me. And when we talked after when I just came and you said, Darryl, how are you? I said, Jeffrey, I've never felt better. I've never felt more confident. I've never felt more centered. And you go, really? You weren't that way when I left. Yeah. And he said, what do you think? I said, coronavirus. Really? And what I said was this, because the possibility or the existence of coronavirus and all the rest of the dissolution of our institutional framework, life as we know it, the planet, species extinction, the rising temperatures, all this stuff like that, there's no safety in the tonal, in the world of objects, in the world of things. We can talk about it, we can project, we can say what we want to happen. The only way that I have found to have any peace at all and happy, because I want happiness, is to retreat to the Nagual, to the internal. It doesn't mean to deny what's happening out there. It doesn't mean to say, oh, Donald's a child of God. You just have to love Donald through it. Fuck you. You go ahead and do it. I have no patience. I'm trying to get acceptance and tolerance. I'm not going to love Donald through this. Let him go through it. All right. And people say that, loving hearts. Fine. Go do it. But my thing is, it is. Let it be. It's a collective result of a collective consciousness that no longer is in existence. And the more we stay in it, the more it lingers. All right? I believe I am an optimist, Jeffrey. And you were talking to a person who is, we'd go to parties and Martha said, don't talk about this stuff, Darryl. You're going to scare people. Martha got the angel of doom. I know what the downside is. But when you got to be a spiritualist and, there is no real, that takes a lot of the sting out of it. But we still want our children to be happy. We want our friends not to die of Alzheimer's or to recover from this or to make it through. And we pray for them. We pray for them. We're ministers. That's what ministers do.
We prayed for Elizabeth Blue.
We prayed for Elizabeth Blue. We did. We supported it. All right. And we know it's not in our hands because we don't see the overall plan. But we know there is a plan, Jeffrey. That's what I have faith in. This was a man with no faith. Jeffrey, this was a man with questions that appeared to be, that's great. I've seen myself in a better light. I would have described myself before as a fearful, tentative, unsure, a fearful person. What I really was, I was a person with questions. And I had fear. But the questions led me to answers that overcame the fear. And I didn't go to them to overcome the fear. I went for the answers because I wanted to know the truth. And that's what you're doing is so extraordinary. Because the truth is not found in the present gestalt or zeitgeist of our culture. This zeitgeist of our culture is a compendium of belief systems, of people who brought it here, different cultures. And fine, it's great. We got all these different kinds of, but that's all it is. It's their excuses for the way it is. They're reasons that we made up for this thing being so horrible. Yeah. Blaming them, blaming this. That's all they are. And there's no blame. But to know that, you have to get through it and to let yourself be led. And that's when you get to know that. That's why you talked about God and what do you think? I went and I listened because I want to know what you thought about. And it was so, because you were open. You had basically said, listen, there's all these definitions. Fine. But let's look at it at another way. All right? That it may not be the way we think it is. I had a direct conversation with God when I was in my state. Sort of embarrassing what happens. I'm sitting there at Lampo. And I said, there you are, you as I. All right. That we're all one. You as I.
God was seeing through your eyes.
Yeah, himself. Okay. Yeah. And the next day, the answer came back. Unequivocal. All is me. Let's not get a little too carried away with this. We're all one. Yeah. All is me. Mm-hmm. And I loved it because the one thing I am comfortable with is being a part of something of love. I am comfortable with that. I know what I want for you, what God wants for you is better than what I want for you because it wants the best for all of us. That's my belief about God. And I was a person who didn't believe it. I was a person who's highly suspicious of reality. Of people and motives and things like that. And I am now, I'm happier than I've ever been, Jeffrey.
I believe it.
Huh.
I believe it. I feel it. Darryl Robert Schoon, once again, a delightful conversation. You're sharing from your heart and from your soul. And from all the feedback I've been getting, it resonates with our audience. So I am so grateful for you to be here once again with me. It seems as if each time we get together, the conversation goes deeper.
And, and I trust it. I trust where you're taking this, Jeffrey.
Yeah.
I do. Like I said, I don't like to talk to people because it triggers so many things in people. But with you, your curiosity and your faith just lets me, it's like the dog in the thing. Take him off the leash. Let's see what happens. And very few people have done that with me.
Well, we've got more conversations coming while you're here in Albuquerque. Okay. Thank you for being with me now, Darryl.
Namaste.
Namaste. And thank you for being with us.
Book 4 in the new Thinking Aloud dialogue series is Charles T. Tart, 70 Years of Exploring Consciousness and Parapsychology, now available on Amazon.
New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu. You can now download all 8 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org.